I never thought I'd have to pull a woman out of my wife's shower while my wife was still standing there half naked, shaking in terror. And the worst part, that woman wasn't some stranger. She was our HOA vice president, Karen Whitfield, holding a small silver recorder in her hand like it was a badge of authority. "You've been flagged for water usage inconsistency," she said, like she was doing her job. But I knew better. She wasn't measuring water. She was measuring control. "My name's Daniel Mercer. I design structural surveillance redundancies for government buildings. Basically, I make sure security systems don't fail." Ironically, it was a system I built that caught Karen breaking into my home. My wife Emily was recovering from hip surgery, and I'd installed water pressure sensors to monitor her shower temperature and flow. Legal, documented, approved. But Karen had decided to turn that into her next weapon. She'd always been that type of HOA enforcer, tight-lipped smile pearls clipboard, the kind who believed every inch of the neighborhood existed to prove her authority. A few months earlier, she'd fined us $75 for having the wrong shade of bronze on our mailbox, then $200 for tulips that weren't HOA approved. Emily paid them quietly, thinking it was just easier that way. She never wanted trouble. But that morning, trouble walked right into our home, past our framed photos, past the handrails I installed for her recovery, and into our bathroom without knocking. I heard the scream before I saw anything raw, terrified, not the kind of sound a man forgets. When I threw open the door, the shower was still running, steam fogging the glass, and Karen was crouched like some predator under the soap shelf. She didn't even flinch. She just straightened, brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, and said in that fake, calm voice, "We reserve the right to inspect for compliance." "Not without a warrant," I snapped. "You agreed to the bylaws," she shot back, walking past me like she owned the place. "I didn't agree to you in my house," I said, but she was already out the door. By the time I'd gotten my wife wrapped in a towel and sitting on the couch, Karen's violation notice was already shoved under our door, hand-delivered, not mailed. Section 14B, Unauthorized Structural Alteration, it read. She was calling my censors an illegal modification. My wife couldn't even look at the paper. She just stared at nothing. Hands trembling, whispering. She was smiling, Daniel. That was the moment something inside me snapped. This wasn't about bylaws. It was about power. For the next few days, I started noticing things, the same black SUV rolling by, slowing down every time it passed our house, the same clipboard flashing in the passenger seat. Our neighbors were getting hit too. The Martins got fined for mulch color, the Nguyen's for planter height. One kid got a citation for chalk drawings on the sidewalk. It wasn't enforcement. It was intimidation. I walked the block one afternoon and the silence was thick. People didn't wave anymore. They closed garage doors the second they saw me. Karen had built a kingdom of fear, one citation at a time. Then came Mark Dillard, the HOA treasurer. A quiet guy, always looked like he was about to apologize for existing. I caught him behind the office building, clutching a folder like it was evidence. He looked startled when I called his name. "You knew," I said, "about her coming into my house." His shoulders slumped. "She told us it was a code issue," he muttered. "Said you installed something invasive, claimed probable cause. And you believed her." He hesitated, eyes flicking to his car. "I didn't vote on that motion. But you didn't stop it either." That landed hard. He adjusted his glasses, voice barely a whisper. "She controls the narrative. Half the board owes her favors. The rest just don't want to end up like you." I could tell he was scared, but then he said something that made my blood run cold. "Karen keeps a list, a compliance priority list. Homeowners she wants gone. You and your wife moved up after that shed approval went through without her consent. She doesn't need to consent to city permits." "I know," he said, "but she acts like she does." When I got home, I told my son Luke what happened. He was on leave from the military home for the first time in a year. He didn't say a word, just nodded once, grabbed a yellow legal pad and started writing. Strategy, timeline, leverage. That night we reviewed the footage from our security cameras. Someone clipboard flashlight had been standing outside our bedroom window a week earlier, aiming a light at the eaves. They were building a case against us. I didn't sleep much that night. Neither did Luke. The next morning I filed an official report with the city attaching every permit, every signed approval. But paperwork wasn't going to stop Karen. She didn't fear rules, she weaponized them. So we shifted tactics. We were done playing defense. When Mark called again, his voice was shaky. "I didn't delete the notes," he said. "Karen told us to purge last month's closed session minutes, but I backed them up. What's in them? You'll want to see it yourself." He wasn't lying. The audio file was clear. Karen's voice, calm, deliberate. Phase 3 isn't about enforcement. It's about message. Establish dominance before people start asking questions. Luke paused the playback. We just stared at each other. "She's not incompetent," he said. "She's strategic. We found spreadsheets too, property values, enforcement targets, emails labeling families as low-yield community assets. It wasn't about compliance. It was about profit." Karen was creating fear to drive down prices, then flipping the neighborhood. That's when Luke called his friend Marisol Reyes, a reporter for a local news affiliate. She agreed to look at what we had, but only if it was airtight. So we spent 2 nights cross-checking timestamps, verifying metadata, building a chain of custody. I hadn't felt this focused in years. Then, just as we were ready to act, I hit a wall. I sat beside my wife that night, and she looked small. Not weak, just tired. Her tea had gone cold, her robe still damp from a shower she'd barely taken. I wanted to promise I could fix everything, but for the first time I wasn't sure. What if I'd made it worse? What if going after Karen only brought more heat on us? What if Emily never felt safe again? I almost gave up that night. Almost. Then Emily looked at me, eyes glassy but steady, and said, "She came into our home because she thought no one would stop her. So stop her." That was it. That was the moment I knew we weren't victims anymore. At 8:12 a.m. the next morning, Luke hit send on an encrypted folder to Marisol. 10 minutes later, she replied with a thumbs-up emoji. At 9:00 a.m., the headline went live. HOA Vice President linked to illegal surveillance and coordinated harassment. The neighborhood exploded. The HOA portal crashed from traffic. Phones rang non-stop. For the first time in months, people were talking, not whispering, but talking. By noon, Karen's house was dark. No movement, no SUV, no fake smiles, just closed blinds. We weren't done. Luke printed 60 flyers, copies of the HOA's internal target list, names redacted, but addresses intact, and slipped them into every mailbox in the neighborhood. No commentary, no accusations, just truth. By 3 p.m., people started comparing notes. She inspected my backyard at night. She fined me for flowers that came with the house. She made my daughter cry over sidewalk chalk. Fear was turning into fury. That evening, Maria Nguyen, the civics teacher who'd once been fined for a shade cloth, came to my door. "I checked the dates," she said. "Her inspections match my logs. It's all there." Then she smiled faintly. "You're not alone anymore." Marisol called that night. Her editor wanted to air the story in full footage, documents, interviews during the next HOA board meeting. "We'll be there," I told her. The meeting was set for Friday at 6 p.m. But by 5:20, the parking lot was overflowing. Neighbors stood shoulder to shoulder, phones out, faces tense but determined. This wasn't just a meeting anymore. It was an uprising. Karen arrived at 5:42 in her usual polished way. Gray blouse, pearls, clipboard clutched like armor. But her posture was off. Her steps were too fast, her smile too thin. She went straight inside without greeting anyone. When the clock hit 6, she stood at the podium. "Good evening," she began, voice brittle. "Before we start, a reminder that any disruption of board proceedings violates Section 2.9. She froze mid-sentence when the camera crew walked in. Marisol, front and center, microphone in hand. I stood up. "Before you continue, I'd like to add an item to the agenda." Karen's jaw clenched. "This meeting is for board business only, Mr. Mercer." Luke's voice cut through the tension, calm level. "The board is the business." The room fell silent. I stepped forward, placed the thick binder of evidence on the table, and flipped it open. Inside are 3 recordings confirming your coordination of unlawful inspections and voter manipulation. There's also a spreadsheet, your spreadsheet ranking homeowners by resale value and enforcement priority. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "This is taken out of context." "No," I said, "this is context." I clicked play on the audio. Her voice filled the room. Phase 3 isn't about enforcement. It's about message. Every person in that room heard it. Every neighbor who'd ever paid a bogus fine, who'd ever felt small, who'd ever been afraid. Karen's eyes darted to Mark Dillard. He didn't look away. "You did this," she hissed. He met her stare and said quietly, "It was always going to come out." I pulled out one last photo, the still from my security camera, showing Karen stepping out of our bathroom, recorder in hand. I didn't need to say anything. The image said everything. "My wife screamed that day," I said softly. "And you smiled." Someone in the back whispered, "Oh my God." Maria stood. "She's been in my yard too, at night." Another neighbor joined in. "She came into my shed." And then another, and another. Karen tried to shout them down, but her voice was swallowed by the rising chorus of truth. For the first time, she wasn't in control. Luke leaned close to her, his tone calm but final. "You can resign now, or wait for the subpoenas." She looked around, realizing no one in that room was with her anymore. Even her loyal board members were staring at the floor. Mark cleared his throat. "According to Section 4.7 of our bylaws, if 2/3 of homeowners vote to dissolve the current board, a special election can be triggered immediately. The threshold has been met." Karen stood still for a long moment, then reached into her bag, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and placed it on the podium. "This is my formal resignation," she said, "effective immediately." And just like that, she walked out, past the cameras, past the whispers, past the neighbors who no longer feared her. No one applauded. No one smiled. The silence that filled the room was heavier than noise. It was relief. Luke closed the binder and handed it back to me. "We did it," he said. But I didn't feel triumph. I felt something quieter, steadier. The next morning I stepped outside with a cup of coffee. The air was cool, the street calm. No SUVs circling. No clipboard shadows in the windows. For the first time in months, my wife opened the blinds herself. Later that day, I saw a "for sale" sign crookedly planted on Karen's lawn. She was gone before noon. By evening, neighbors were gathered in Maria's yard, talking, laughing softly, sharing stories. No podiums, no rules, just people being neighbors again. I sat on the oak bench my father built after Vietnam, the one that had survived Storm's time, and now Karen Whitfield. He used to tell me peace doesn't come when it's quiet. It comes when fear finally loses its grip. He was right. Karen thought power meant control. But real power is standing up when everyone else stays silent. And if you're ever living under a Karen like her, remember this: silence isn't safety. It's surrender.